AskReddit. Doctors of Reddit, what's the best asking for a friend story you've heard? Wife's dad is a urologist. When we first started dating, a friend of mine wanted her to ask if any of the penis enlargement pills were legit and actually worked. She went with the asking for a friend approach, and he immediately assumed she was talking about me. Thanks, babe. So do they? Asking for a friend. He said no, but I think you, your friend, should try anyways. One girl was interested in laxatives for a friend. She tried to learn everything about the dose, where what to buy, how to drink. She was brought in a week later with complete intestinal atony. She tried to lose weight so much and drank 2 or 3 tablets at a time. Oh, I have more stories like that, LOL. Hope you got better. I asked my doctor about AA for a friend of mine. Really. Years later, the doctor still asks me how I'm doing with my sobriety. I've stopped trying to convince him I was really asking for a friend. Wow, good thing you don't live in Norway. Apparently, they will revoke your driver's license the second they suspect you may have issues with drinking. I would just like to specify that I don't have personal experience with this and don't know for sure. I just recall seeing a post on our Norwegian subreddit about a guy who was depressed and suicidal who had gotten drunk once several days before seeing his doctor about getting help, who then had his license revoked. There were also several people in the comments saying they had a similar experience. ER Doc had a guy who just got out of jail a few days earlier, came in with his girlfriend who had just signed in for a STD check. Walk in to meet them and he says casually, "Is it possible to get gonorrhea in your throat?" At that moment, I knew he had gonorrhea in his throat. Who goes to the ER for an STD check? That's hardly an emergency. People without insurance or with Medicaid. It's literally how they get their medical care in the US. Lady walks in and goes, "So if you cheated and got pregnant, but then had sex with your husband, would the baby become his?" It took everything in me not to laugh. Potentially interesting note. It has happened where a woman gave birth to the children of 2 different men at the same time. The younger child usually had to go to ICU though. IRC, there have only been 2 recorded cases in the first world countries that had good documentation, so it could happen more often. It just might not be recorded properly. Not a doctor, but public health worker. Kinda NSFW. Had an older man come into our clinic asking for a specific type of STD check. Guy's ex-wife was going around telling rumors that he was having sex with his goats, so was wanting to know if there was any way we could do an STD test that could prove if he hadn't had sex with any goats. Through this whole conversation, he just abruptly asked, so if someone was having sex with a goat, what STDs could they get? That dude is totally his goats. Do you sleep with hot male patients? Asking for a friend. Kind of you to ask for a friend, since you obviously aren't asking for yourself. If the answer is yes, do you sleep with ugly male patients? Not a doctor, but pharmacist. Someone called the pharmacy one day, a young guy. I picked up. "Excuse me, how much does Viagra cost? Is there anything cheaper? I have someone that needs it." I explain everything and suddenly, "Will it work if I take it with alcohol?" The guy began asking for someone else. At the end was for him and was asking just because he wanted his little one to work while drunk. So does it work? Asking for a friend. It'll stay up, but you probably won't be able to finish. Also, don't take things that mess with your circulation blood pressure on top of alcohol. There are easier ways to have a really dumb night out. Not mine, but one of the older pharmacists I work with went out to help this 20-ish girl with some med questions. She then asked him about condoms and said, "If you were to do me, what condom would you use?" Yeah, he just walked away. Sometimes people just accidentally phrase the question wrong. He probably should have just given her a generic answer like, "Any name brand. You can't go wrong with Magnum, Durex, or Trojan." And then he could have still continued to not commit with her. My father is a doctor, and he got a call once in the middle of the night from his call share doctor's patient. The man asked what to do about a bump on his friend's arm that he scratched and something came out. He mentioned it was leaking a little oil now. It was a zit. He scratched a pimple. Woke the whole family up at 3 a.m. because he had to page my dad over a zit. This makes me annoyed because I have had to call doctors at 3 a.m. with lab results when they're bad, and I almost always get a huge attitude. I get no one likes to be woken up in the middle of the night, but I'm not the one making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year to be up at this hour to tell you your patient's blood is full of dead heart muscle. I briefly dated a doctor, and she told me a few hilarious stories. 1. If my friend masturbated with someone else's vibrator, will she get an STD? 2. Can wearing a butt plug all day give you diarrhea? 3. If you have an ulcer and swallow a guy's cum, can you get pregnant? 2 out of these 3 seems like somewhat legitimate questions. Not a doctor, but I was an intern. I was in the OPD, and this man from a different province came in and told me his friend had injected petroleum jelly in their member years ago and that now it's getting painful. Yeah, he came back the next day and showed his lumpy member. This is a common thing apparently. Saw a patient who did the same. Had to have his penis reconstructed. He told everyone it was worth it. Eye doctor here. Finally closed our offices to all but emergency care. Last year or so, I had a staff member asking me for a friend if she got shot in the eye with cum and is now getting mild discharge, is that okay? I looked at her eye and saw discharge. Went to the cabinet, gave a bottle of antibiotic to her for her friend, and then went back to my patients. 2 days later, I look at her and say, "Your eye is looking much better today." She says, "Thanks, the discharge stopped a day and a half after using the drops." So her eye was pregnant, right? Unlikely, but she can no longer see women with that eye. She can only see semen. Not a doctor, but I used to work next to AA Pharmacy, and my boss, a 55-year-old man, asked me to go buy him some condoms for his nephew. Alcoholics Anonymous Pharmacy. Studies have been done about the effects of THC on glaucoma. When I worked for a glaucoma specialist, we had a hippie-type person come in with their family member for a new patient eval and asked the doctor to sign paperwork okaying a medical marijuana script for the patient's glaucoma. Problem was the patient was totally fine, didn't find any signs of the disease, and his eye pressure was within normal limits, and the doctor did not appreciate having someone try to trick him. To piggyback off this, and because I'm tired of the questions, marijuana only lowers your eye pressure for max 4 hours. To have sustained effects, you need to hit the blunt 6 times a day and nearly 2,200 times a year. Take the damn eye drops. Another family medicine doc called an ER doc yesterday on the cell phone asking what to do when you got soap in your eyes. Choose wisely, folks. I mean, it says so on the bottle. In case of contact with eyes, rinse thoroughly and contact a medical professional. Better safe than sorry. One of my besties called me late at night after his B-Day party. He said someone who was staying the night wanted to have sex with his girlfriend. They were drunk and a little uncoordinated, and somehow the frenulum, the little string thingy at the tip of the penis, ripped, and it won't stop bleeding. I gave his friend some general advice on stopping the bleeding and recommended a trip to the ER. The next day, he asked me if I had any recommendations for urologists for his friend because he needs minor surgery on his pee-pee. I told him to cut the nonsense, and in response, he sent me a pic of his injured penis. So long story short, his wang got a remodeling, and he is still with this vagina dentata sporting women. I liked that the friend was having sex with his girlfriend, and he was still supportive enough to ask advice for the friend. There is one dream where in my dream, I'm Spider-Man, but I'm losing my powers. I'm climbing a wall, but I keep falling. In my dream, actually, it's not even my dream, it's a friend of mine's dream. You know, I'm something of a doctor myself. Doctors are all busy at the moment, and I was sure the top comment was going to start with, not a doctor, but I saw this dude say to a doctor, "Can 2 white people have a black child?" Asking for a friend. The man's wife had an affair. The dude had the baby in the stroller, and when he was walking out, he looked like he was going to yeet the child, and I was secretly dying inside. That's rough. He must have had so many emotions running through his head. I wonder if the guy ever suspected anything before his wife gave birth. Yes, hi, this is Dr. X. I need to call in a prescription for hydroxychloroquine. Do you have any in stock? Asking for a friend. I have lupus, and while I no longer take Plaquenil for a couple of reasons, reading about how doctors are writing themselves and their families' prescriptions makes my blood boil. There are a lot of people who legitimately need it for autoimmune issues, and they can't get it right now. We're already at higher risk for COVID, now we have to try not to catch anything while flaring. Divorced women, cougars, like to explain muscle strains as sex injuries to get a rise out of docs. Best way to deal is to stay monotone and not react. Patient describes proximal abductor muscle pain in the hip flexion during recreational activity. Rated 7 out of 10. Pain is now present during ambulation. If you don't react, they move along. Doesn't take long in the office to have seen and/or heard everything. I'm not interested that you are recently divorced, started working out, and discovered Tinder. Good on you, but it takes more to get a rise out of me. One colleague in training had a professional cuddler with a similar injury. Doc was very conservative, possibly on the sheltered side, and in front of two of his superiors during the case, and she was not shy. I would add she was not visually what I assume most would hope for in a professional cuddler either. That one I enjoyed on account of him, not her.